There are nights when the heart feels quietly unfinished, when the day has ended on the outside, yet something inside still waits, still wonders. Nights when the mind drifts back over old choices and untraveled paths, when questions about purpose and calling rise like faint stars on a hazy horizon. In that soft ache, somewhere between restlessness and surrender, the soul begins to whisper, "There must be more than this. There must be a reason for this life." This story settles into that longing, resting beside the quiet question of why a life was formed, why certain gifts and sensitivities were woven so carefully into one heart. Tonight the gentle path will follow the call of a young prophet, Jeremiah, one who felt too small, too afraid, too unprepared, and yet was chosen before he ever spoke a word. Through his story, the listener is invited to feel the nearness of a God who knows every breath, every fear, every hidden thread of calling. Before the story goes any further, the body is invited to soften. Let the shoulders drift down, just a little, as if placing an invisible burden onto the floor beside the bed. Let the jaw relax, letting go of the tightness that tried to hold every word and worry in place. Let the hands rest loosely, on the blanket, or by the sides, fingers uncurled, open to peace. Take a slow deep breath, filling the lungs gently, like the first cool breeze after a long warm day, and then let that breath fall out again, unforced, like water flowing down a quiet hillside stream. One more slow breath, in and out. The room does not need to be perfect. The thoughts do not need to be silent. It is enough that the heart is here, turning softly toward God. If these stories bring you peace, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more nightly reflections, and share where you're listening from tonight. Your words and presence help keep this space warm and growing. Now, take another slow breath. Let's begin. The scene of Jeremiah's calling rises slowly, like dawn over a gentle valley. There is a quiet room, perhaps the simplicity of a young life. Daily tasks, familiar paths, the same small patterns of each day repeating. Outside, the light is soft, neither full day nor deep night, a tender in between, where the world feels thinner. Perhaps a breeze slips through an open window, brushing past simple cloth, stirring a strand of hair, carrying with it the faint scent of distant fields and tilled earth. In that hush, the sense of being watched over has always been there, subtle, steady, like a hand near the shoulder, not yet resting, but never far away. Long before Jeremiah understood his own story, long before he knew the word prophet or imagined speaking on behalf of heaven, a deeper knowing had already surrounded him. A voice older than time had already whispered over his unformed days. I knew you before your first breath, not as a heavy declaration, but as a gentle assurance, like warm light resting on closed eyes. Every quiet sensitivity, every tear that came quickly, every ache for justice and truth that he could not explain, had been part of a careful design. He was not an accident pressed into service. He was a heart prepared in advance, held in loving hands that saw further than his fear ever could. In the soft lamp glow of this imagined room, the listener can almost see him, perhaps seated in stillness, perhaps standing at a window, tracing familiar patterns in the dust. He feels ordinary, small among the movements of nations and kings. Yet around him, the unseen presence of God gathers like evening light pooling in the corners, touching every surface with quiet gold. The words that rise within him are not loud, not crushing. They are steady, calm, filled with a knowing that reaches deeper than his hesitation. There is a promise gently wrapped inside this moment. The same God who formed Jeremiah, who saw every day of his life before one of them came to be, looks with the same tenderness upon every listening soul tonight. The same careful attention, the same patient shaping, the same understanding of fears and limits, rests over this bed, this room, this heart. Purpose is not something earned from God. It is something received, like a gift placed into open hands. So the body is invited to soften again, to let these truths settle not only in thought, but in muscle and breath. Let the forehead smooth, as if a warm hand gently rested there, easing away pressure and expectation. Let each breath come a little slower, as if the lungs themselves are learning to trust that there is enough air, enough time, enough grace. With every exhale, imagine release, the loosening of the need to have everything figured out tonight. It is enough to rest in being known, being seen, being gently called. In the growing stillness, the story of Jeremiah's call becomes a mirror and a lantern, reflecting the ache for purpose, and lighting the path toward a God who answers that ache with presence, not pressure. This night does not demand decisions or grand vows. It simply offers a place to lie down in the truth that every life is held within a wiser plan. The heart can rest in the assurance that divine love stands at the center of every calling, including the quiet one stirring beneath these blankets. There are moments in a young life when the world feels too large, when the sky stretches farther than courage can reach, and every path seems meant for someone stronger, someone wiser, someone with a louder voice. Jeremiah lived in those moments often, moving through familiar days with a quiet heart, watching other people speak boldly, make decisions, hold authority, while he felt the smallness of his own presence like a pebble resting at the edge of a great river. And yet, beneath the surface of that quiet life, something had always stirred in him. a tenderness to things others overlooked, a heaviness when injustice brushed the streets, an ache that rose whenever truth seemed lost in shadows. He did not call these things gifts. He did not imagine they were signs of anything holy. To him they were simply sensitivities, burdens even. Small currents he tried to ignore so he could live safely unnoticed. But God sees differently. The qualities a frightened heart labels as weaknesses are often the very fibers God weaves into a calling. And in Jeremiah, those fibers glowed like unseen threads, waiting for the moment when divine breath would move gently through them, awakening something long prepared. Picture the young prophet now, perhaps sitting at the threshold of a doorway, watching the dimming light soften the edges of his neighborhood. Children may be returning home from play, distant voices drifting upward like tiny lanterns carried by the evening breeze. The scent of warm earth rises from the ground, mingling with the faint sweetness of crushed grass where bare feet passed earlier in the day. A simple clay lamp flickers beside him, its small flame bending and straightening with each movement of the air. This is not a palace, not a sanctuary, not a place of grandeur. And yet, the holy has always loved ordinary spaces, weaving sacredness into humble corners where soft hearts are willing to listen. In that twilight calm, Jeremiah feels the whisper of a presence he cannot name. Not yet. It is not loud, not startling, not a thunder across the hills. It feels instead like awareness, like the gentle realization that he is not alone in this quiet place. A warmth settles along his chest, subtle but steady, a sense that something larger than his fears rests nearby. His thoughts turn inward, drifting through memories he rarely shares. Times when he felt things too deeply, when sorrow clung to him long after others had moved on. Times when the suffering of his people wound itself around his ribs like a vine, tightening with every story of injustice. Times when he felt words forming in his heart that he never dared to speak, words that held more weight than he knew what to do with. He wondered if these feelings made him strange. He wondered if they were flaws he was meant to overcome. But in this moment, as the air stills around him, he senses that these quiet burdens were never accidents, never random. They were the first soft echoes of a calling, the earliest dawn of a purpose shaped for him long before he could understand it. The whisper grows, not in volume, but in clarity, a presence that seems to draw near in compassion, not demand, a presence that feels like someone bending close, not to overwhelm him, but to honor him, like a craftsman standing beside a treasured creation, like a parent brushing a gentle hand near the cheek of a child who feels too small for the world. Jeremiah cannot yet hear the words of the calling, but his heart begins to sense the nearness of the one who will speak them. A nearness that feels like soft light touching every shadow. A nearness that does not erase fear, but wraps around it, steadying it. A nearness that says without sound, I have always been here. In this quiet unfolding, one truth begins to settle inside him. Purpose does not arrive with a shout. It often begins with a hush, a slow awakening, like morning light creeping gently across a room, illuminating the very places the heart once tried to hide. So he sits in the soft dusk, letting the presence linger, letting the warmth settle deeper into his bones. And though he does not speak aloud, a silent question rises within him. Fragile, trembling, but honest. What is this you are forming in me? What is this I am becoming? And heaven answers, not yet with instruction, but with companionship. A companionship that says, you were never meant to discover purpose alone. You were never meant to walk without me. Every calling begins first with presence, with a God who draws near before he sends forth. The air thickens with peace, slow, steady, grounding. The lamp beside him flickers once, then glows brighter, as though responding to a breath not of this world. Jeremiah lifts his eyes, and though nothing dramatic appears before him, he feels something shift inside. A beginning, a first step, a quiet awakening of a life that will one day speak truth to nations. But tonight is simply being held by the one who formed him. Let the listener breathe gently now, in, as if drawing in the nearness of God, and out, as if letting go of the fear of not being enough. The story moves deeper, but not hastily. Purpose does not rush. Calling does not demand speed. It grows like roots in soft soil, unseen, but strong. There comes a moment when the quiet presence that has lingered at the edges of a life begins to move closer. When what once felt like distant comfort starts to press gently on the heart, asking to be noticed, asking to be received. For Jeremiah, this moment arrives in stillness, not in spectacle, in the soft hush where thoughts begin to slow, and the soul becomes more aware of what has always been near. He is there in the fading light, the sky above him deepening into shades of blue and violet, a single early star resting like a promise on the horizon. The familiar sounds of his town drift into the background, footsteps softening on worn paths, doors closing with gentle finality, quiet voices settling into evening routines. Yet within his chest, something begins to stir. Not a panic, not a storm, but a steadying pulse. A sense that the next breath will not be like the ones before. The presence he has felt there, hovering at the edges of awareness, now draws closer, not with force, but with a tenderness that honors his fragility. It is like standing near a warm fire after a long walk through cold air, like feeling gentle light rest upon closed eyelids, like realizing that every lonely thought has been quietly overheard by someone who never left. In that hush, a voice begins to form, not carried by the wind, not echoing from the hills, but rising within the deepest places of his being, where fears and hopes intertwine. This voice does not crush his hesitation. It speaks through it, wrapping each trembling thought in understanding. Before I formed you, I knew you. The words are not sharp commands. They are more like a memory being returned to him, a truth he has always carried but never named. He feels them move through him like a slow current, touching every moment he has ever felt small, unseen, unnecessary. Before anyone else measured your worth, I had already held you in my heart. Jeremiah feels his breath catch. The voice continues, steady, patient. Before you drew breath, before you opened your eyes to this world, I had already set you apart. I saw the shape of your compassion, the tenderness of your sorrow, the way your heart would ache when justice was forgotten. These things were never flaws. They were the marks of a calling woven into you with loving hands. The young prophet trembles, yet not with dread. There is a strange safety in these words, as if each one is gently gathering the scattered pieces of his identity, bringing them home. He had thought himself too young, too quiet, too easily overwhelmed by the pain of others. But this voice speaks of those very things as treasures, deliberate choices in the way he was formed. I appointed you to carry my words, to be a vessel of my heart to the nations. The phrase settles heavy and holy over him. Nations. The word feels far bigger than the narrow streets he knows, larger than the rooms he has walked, beyond the small circle of his daily life. His hesitation rises like a wave, instinctive, raw. I am too young, too small, too uncertain. He does not speak it aloud, yet the voice answers as if his thoughts were written in clear light between them. Do not say you are only small. Where you see limitation, I see intention. Where you see youth, I see readiness. Where you see trembling, I see a heart soft enough to carry my compassion. The voice is not correcting to shame him. It is correcting to free him. Each word gently untangles the knot of unworthiness coiled within his chest. Each truth loosens the grip of the story he has told himself. That purpose belongs only to the strong, the eloquent, the fearless. I am with you. Those words come like warm rain across dry ground. They do not erase his hesitations, but they surround them, soak them, soften their edges. He realizes that the call being placed upon his life is not an expectation to perform alone. It is an invitation to walk in step with the one who has known him from the beginning. The listener can feel this moment as if standing beside Jeremiah in the deepening dusk. The air cool on the skin, the earth solid beneath bare feet, the quiet stretching out like a gentle blanket. In that imagined space, It is possible to sense how this same voice leans close to every heart that feels unqualified, unseen, unsure. The same assurance whispers through time. Before you were formed, you were known. Before you had words, you were loved. Before you understood calling, you were already held within a careful purpose. Let the body rest in that for a moment. Allow the shoulders to soften again, as if the weight of having to prove anything is sliding away. Let the face relax, the small muscles around the eyes releasing, the space between the brows loosening. Let each breath deepen just a little, drawn in slowly, then released like a long sigh at the end of a demanding day. There is no need to strive in this moment. No need to gather credentials or convince heaven to take notice. The God who spoke to Jeremiah speaks still into quiet rooms and tired hearts. Not with accusation, but with remembrance, reminding each soul that it has never been a stranger to him. As Jeremiah listens, the trembling in his heart does not fully disappear, but it is now held inside a greater assurance, like a small boat rocking gently on a vast, calm sea. His hesitation remains, yet it is wrapped in the warmth of having been chosen by a love that understands every doubt. The voice that reaches through his hesitation is not impatient. It does not rush him forward. It simply remains steady, near, ready to walk with him into whatever comes next. In the soft silence after those words, the young prophet inhales slowly, feeling the air fill his lungs like courage arriving in small, faithful measures. He does not yet know all that this calling will cost, all that it will require. But tonight, he knows this. He is known. He is accompanied. He is invited into a purpose that has never depended on his perfection, only on his willingness to walk with the one who calls. Let the listener rest in that same invitation, to be known more deeply than their fears, to be called not in spite of their tenderness, but through it. To let the voice of divine love speak more loudly than the stories of inadequacy that have played for so long in the mind. Breathe in slowly, as if receiving those words of knowing. Breathe out gently, as if releasing the belief that you must be someone else to be used by God. The night grows deeper now, and the story will soon move into the moment when God draws even nearer, when the call upon Jeremiah is sealed with a touch, and fear is met with a tenderness that lingers like warm light on waiting skin. There are moments in a calling when fear rises like a tall shadow, stretching itself across every thought, every imagined future, every fragile hope. Jeremiah stands inside such a moment now. The voice of God has reached him, wrapped in tenderness, wrapped in truth, wrapped in a love that knew him long before he knew himself. And yet, the weight of what he has heard settles heavily upon his young heart, not as punishment, not as shame, but as the overwhelming sense of being too small for a mission that feels impossibly large. The evening deepens around him, the final colors of dusk melting slowly into soft indigo. Crickets begin their song in the nearby grasses, steady, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the land itself. The town has grown quiet, lamps glowing in warm clusters behind closed doors, the gentle rise and fall of voices drifting faintly along stone paths. But Jeremiah feels suspended in another kind of stillness, a holy stillness. A stillness where time pauses long enough for a trembling heart to be met by the one who understands every nuance of its fear. Inside him, thoughts race in soft turmoil. How can I speak words larger than my life? How can I stand before people who will not listen? How can I carry a message when my voice feels so small? How can someone like me be chosen? The questions spiral gently, not harsh, not panicked, but honest. Honesty is not something God rejects. The Holy One draws near to honest fear the same way a parent draws near to a child whose hands shake while reaching for something new. And so, in this tender moment, the presence of God draws closer still, closer than breath, closer than thought, closer than the layers of self-doubt wrapped around Jeremiah's young shoulders. The air seems to warm slightly, not in heat, but in nearness. A soft radiance settles around him, the kind that feels more like a caress than a light. The breeze calms, as if holding its breath. Even the evening sounds soften, not disappearing, but quieting in reverence. Jeremiah lowers his gaze, shoulders curved inward, as if trying to hide the smallness he feels. He does not know what will happen next. He only knows his fear, and the sense that the one who called him has not moved away. Then, in a moment that feels outside the ordinary rhythm of the world, something gentle touches him. Not a heavy weight, not a forceful command. A touch, subtle, warm, purposeful. A touch upon his lips, not to silence him, but to prepare him. Not to pressure him, but to reassure him. Not to make him someone else, but to awaken what was placed within him long before he ever drew breath. This touch is not like human touch. It carries peace deeper than words. It holds understanding deeper than explanation. It pours courage into places too fragile to hold it on their own. It speaks without sound. I have placed my words in you. Jeremiah's breath trembles. He feels something shift. Not the disappearance of fear, but the transformation of it. Fear does not vanish. It becomes wrapped in purpose, cradled inside divine companionship, held rather than dismissed. The young prophet senses that the God who calls him has not asked him to build strength alone. He has given him the very breath to speak, the very truth to carry, the very compassion that will shape each message he delivers. It is as though a quiet river has begun to flow through him, moving gently through every doubt, every fragile place, every hesitation curled around his spirit. The warmth of the divine touch lingers, not fading quickly, but settling deep, like soft light, sinking through water until it reaches the riverbed. A stillness follows, a stillness that feels sacred, a stillness where Jeremiah realizes that the God who formed him is also the God who will sustain him. Around him, the night grows fuller, stars gathering overhead like scattered embers glowing softly against a dark sky. He lifts his eyes slowly, taking in the quiet beauty. A single star brighter than the rest seems to hold his gaze, shimmering in gentle rhythm. He wonders if the heavens are reminding him that even the smallest light becomes a guide in darkness. He wonders if the God who touched his lips is whispering that purpose does not require greatness, only obedience, only willingness, only a heart that says yes even while trembling. He inhales, the breath slow and deep, feeling it settle into the spaces where fear has lived for so long. The exhale flows out like release. Release of the belief that calling belongs only to the strong. Release of the thought that youth disqualifies him. Release of the story he once told himself, that he had nothing worth giving. In this moment, he does not see the years ahead, the challenges, the resistance, the tears he will later shed for his people. He sees only this: God has touched his life. God has placed words within him. God has promised to stay near. The listener is invited into this moment with soft reverence, to imagine that same touch near the heart, that same light resting gently upon inward fears, that same reassurance whispering quietly through uncertainty. You're not called because of your strength. You're called because of my presence. Let that truth settle into the body like warm light pooling in the chest. Let the breath deepen softly. Let the heart rest in the assurance that calling is never carried alone. This is the touch that changes everything, not by erasing fear, but by surrounding it with love, not by demanding perfection, but by offering presence, not by pushing forward, but by drawing near. There is a holy quiet that follows the touch of God, a stillness that does not feel empty. It feels full, full of warmth, full of presence, full of something new that has entered the deepest places of the heart and chosen to remain. Jeremiah stands inside that quiet now, the place where fear has been met, not with scolding, but with tenderness. His lips still seem to remember the gentle weight of that divine touch. A warmth lingers there, not burning, not overwhelming, but steady, like a small coal glowing softly in the center of a hearth. He does not yet have all the words for what has happened. He only knows that something within him has shifted. Something in him has been set apart, awakened, blessed. Around him, the night has fully unfolded. The sky is a deep velvet expanse, scattered with stars that shimmer like distant promises. The air carries the coolness of late evening, brushing softly against his skin, moving gently through his hair. In the distance, a lone dog barks once, then falls silent. An occasional footstep sounds on the stone paths, then fades into the hush. The world continues, simple, ordinary. Yet for Jeremiah, nothing feels entirely ordinary anymore. He has been touched by the one who shaped light and land and life. He has been assured that his smallness is seen, understood, cherished. The touch upon his mouth did not erase his history. It did not rewrite his personality. It did not turn him into someone louder, bolder, more polished. Instead, it made sacred what was already there, his quiet nature, his tender conscience, his deep response to injustice. All of these are now marked as intentional, as part of a design that leads somewhere beyond his own imagining. He closes his eyes for a moment. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he can almost feel the movement of God's hand again, not as a repetition, but as an echo, as if that one touch continues to travel through him, reaching his thoughts, his memories, his hopes, his fears. It is as though a gentle voice moves with it, saying again and again, "You are not alone in this calling. You will not speak from emptiness. You will speak from what I place in you." The listener is invited to breathe into that same truth, to draw in a slow breath, feeling the chest rise gently, and then let it fall, long, unhurried, like a river slipping around a smooth stone. With each inhale, imagine receiving assurance. With each exhale, imagine releasing the belief that everything depends on your own strength. Jeremiah lets his fingertips brush lightly across his lips. There is nothing to see, no mark, no sign that others could point to, and yet he knows, deep within, that something sacred has occurred. He feels as though his words now belong to a larger story, as though his voice has been folded into a greater voice, as though each future sentence he will speak in obedience will carry traces of that touch. Memories begin to rise in him like small lights along a path. Times when he heard conversations so steeped in falsehood that his heart ached. Moments when he saw the vulnerable pushed aside and felt a fierce sorrow burn behind his eyes. Days when he walked through his city and sensed a heaviness over his people, a weight of choices and patterns that were pulling them away from the God who loved them. These memories no longer sit in him like unsorted burdens. They now gather around the touch on his lips. They make a kind of sense. They are threads drawn toward a center, anchored by the hand that formed him and has now claimed his words as instruments of healing and truth. He realizes slowly that the calling on his life is not a sudden invention of this night. It is the unveiling of something long present, like dawn uncovering the shape of a landscape that has been there all along. The touch of God does not create him anew from nothing. It reveals who he has been in the heart of God from the beginning. For the listener, there is comfort in this. The sense that purpose is not a race to become someone different. It is a gentle discovery of the person God has been. Forming all along, the quiet patterns of compassion, the strong reactions to injustice, the deep longing for truth and peace. These are not accidents. They are signs, soft footprints of a calling that has been present beneath the surface for years, perhaps for a lifetime. Let the body hear that as good news. Let the shoulders loosen, as if a heavy cloak of self-criticism is being lifted away. Let the neck rest more comfortably against the pillow or cushion, feeling supported, held. Let the breath slow to a peaceful rhythm, in and out, each cycle a reminder that life itself is a gift, sustained moment by a faithful God. Jeremiah opens his eyes again, and the world seems both the same and different. The same streets will be there in the morning, the same routines, the same familiar faces, the same complex struggles of his people. Yet now, he will move through them with a new awareness. He has been touched for a purpose. His life is not aimless. His days are not random. He is part of a story that reaches beyond his time, beyond his city, beyond his own understanding. He does not fully grasp what messages he will be asked to carry. He does not see the tears he will cry in lonely places, the resistance he will face, the questions he will still bring to God in weary hours. But for this moment, it is enough to know that he has been chosen by love, that the one who called him has laid a gentle claim upon his voice, that every word spoken in obedience will be accompanied by the one who touched him first. The scene softens now, like a painting slowly dimming at the edges as lamplight grows low. Jeremiah steps back into the simple shelter of his home. Perhaps he lies down on a woven mat, feeling the familiar support beneath his body. Perhaps he pulls a light covering over himself, listening as the night settles deeper and deeper around him. The stars continue their silent shimmering. The earth continues its quiet turning, and over one resting young prophet, the presence of God keeps watch in this imagined stillness. The listener is invited to share that same sense of being watched over, to imagine a nearness that does not sleep, a kindness that does not withdraw when fear appears, to rest in the thought that every life surrendered to God's touch becomes a vessel, however small, of divine purpose. No one is asked to be perfect before they are called. No one is asked to be fearless before they are chosen. God meets trembling hearts exactly where they are, touches them with grace, and then walks beside them into every unknown path ahead. Breathe in once more, slowly. Let the breath rise and fall like a tide, gentle, predictable, safe. Trust that even in your questions, even in your limitations, there is a God who knows how to place purpose within you and bring it forth in the right time. The night around Jeremiah deepens into quiet rest. The first calling has been sealed with a touch. The next steps will soon begin to unfold, carrying both the weight and the wonder of being chosen. There is a sacred heaviness that settles on the heart after a divine touch, a quiet weight that is not burdensome, but holy. Jeremiah feels it now, resting across his chest like a warm cloak, reminding him that something eternal has brushed against the smallness of his life. He lies awake in the dim stillness of his home, eyes open to the shadows moving softly along the walls, shaped by the flicker of a small clay lamp burning low beside him. The room is simple, woven mats stacked carefully, jars lined neatly along rough shelves, the familiar scent of oiled wood drifting through the air. Yet even in this familiar space, nothing feels quite the same. The world outside has not changed, but something within him has. He turns slowly onto his back, feeling the firmness of the mat beneath him, the slight coolness of the air moving across his skin. His breaths come quietly, one after another, like gentle waves reaching the edge of a shore. With each rise and fall of his chest, he senses the reality of what has happened, not a dream, not imagination, but a calling. placed upon his life like a hidden flame, a calling that now glows softly inside him, steady, enduring. For a long moment he simply lies there, listening to the subtle hum of the night, a soft rustle outside as a breeze brushes through low branches, the faint creak of wood settling, distant footsteps fading deeper into the darkness. Jeremiah's body remains still, but his thoughts begin to move, slowly, gently, like leaves drifting along a quiet stream. He thinks of the words he heard. Before I formed you, I knew you. Before you drew breath, I set you apart. He does not repeat them aloud, but they echo within him, like soft ripples returning again and again to the same center. Each time they return, they reach a deeper place. Each time they settle, they bring a little more peace, a little more steadiness to the trembling inside him. There is something almost strange in how known he feels, as if the God of creation has walked through the memories of his childhood with him, has stood beside him in every moment he felt overlooked, has held him through every tear he shed without understanding why his heart carried so much weight, as if all those moments that felt scattered, disconnected, uncertain, now gather into one tender truth. Nothing was wasted, nothing was unseen, nothing was without purpose. He closes his eyes, not in weariness, but in reverence. Behind his eyelids, light flickers softly, like the reflection of a lamp on quiet water, and he senses that God is still near, not hovering above him in some unreachable place, but resting close, in the dark, like a companion keeping watch over a restless heart. The presence feels patient, not urging him to rise and declare anything, not pushing him toward immediate action, simply remaining, steady, gentle, as though God is giving him space to absorb what has happened, space to breathe beneath the weight and wonder of this new beginning. Jeremiah's mind drifts to the people around him, his community, his neighbors, his family, faces he has known since childhood, voices he hears daily, lives woven with both faith and fear, courage and compromise. He feels a deep ache for them, a tenderness that has always lived in him, but now begins to glow with more clarity. Perhaps this is part of his calling as well, to feel deeply not just for himself, but for those around him, to carry their pain with compassion, not judgment, to speak truth not as condemnation, but as invitation, to love as one who knows he has been loved first. The listener is invited to imagine lying in that same quiet room, feeling the nearness of God like a warm presence resting just beside the bed, not asking for perfection, not demanding certainty, simply offering companionship, offering the gentle assurance that purpose grows slowly, like dawn rising with patience across a dark horizon. Let the breath soften, in drawing in peace, out, releasing the weight of needing to understand everything tonight. Let the shoulders relax a little more, sinking deeper into whatever holds them. Let the jaw unclench, letting go of silent tension carried through the day. Let the eyes rest, whether open or closed, knowing that nothing more is required in this moment than gentle awareness. Jeremiah inhales deeply, the air cool and grounding. When he exhales, he feels a trace of fear still present, but something else surrounds it, a quiet courage, not loud, not fiery, but steady, a courage born not from confidence in himself, but from confidence in the one who called him. Purpose is never carried alone. God does not shape a calling and then step back to observe. He walks with those he chooses, guiding every word, every step, every breath. Jeremiah senses this truth like a soft mantle placed around his shoulders, the mantle of companionship, the mantle of divine presence that will walk with him into places he cannot yet imagine. He does not know the cost, he does not know the path, but he knows the one who will walk that path beside him, and that is enough. Outside, the night sky holds its silent constellations. Stars glow softly like lamps hung across the heavens by a patient hand. Their steady light seems to whisper something into the stillness. Not every purpose begins with certainty. Not every calling begins with clarity. Some begin with a simple touch, a quiet whisper, a small unfolding of obedience. Jeremiah breathes again, slower this time, deeper. His eyes grow heavier. The sacred weight within him steadies. Peace settles around him like warm fabric drawn gently up to the chin. He is not finished with fear, but he has begun to trust that his fear is held, not judged, and that is where obedience begins, in being held, before being sent. Obedience often begins long before a single step is taken, long before a task is understood, long before a path is clear. It begins as something small and quiet, like a root pressing gently into soft soil beneath the surface of a field. Unseen, patient, persistent. Jeremiah lies in the dim stillness of his home, the touch of God still warm in his memory, the words still echoing like distant song within his chest. He has not yet stood before anyone to speak. He has not yet carried a message into crowded streets or before resistant faces. But something inside him has already begun to lean toward yes. Not a loud yes, not a confident yes, but a tender one. A yes born from being known, from being understood, from being loved in the very places he once believed disqualified him. The night holds its gentle sounds around him. Soft wind brushing past the corners of the house. A faint creak of wood as the structure settles. Far away, perhaps an animal moves through the outskirts of the town. Its presence more sensed than heard. Inside this small room, another kind of movement unfolds. The unseen growth of trust. Jeremiah turns onto his side, drawing his knees slightly closer to his chest, arms resting in a loose fold. His body seeks comfort, a position that feels contained, safe. In this curled posture, the sacred words he heard earlier return once more, flowing through him in slow waves. Before I formed you, I knew you. I have placed my words in you. I am with you. He lets these phrases rise and fall in his mind, not forcing them, not analyzing them. They move through him like breath, like the steady in and out that continues whether the mind is busy or quiet. Each repetition seems to send a thin root of trust deeper into his soul. Trust that he is not an accident. Trust that his tenderness has meaning. Trust that the God who touched his lips will not abandon him when his voice begins to tremble in public places. Obedience does not yet look like action tonight. It looks like consent to be loved. It looks like allowing God to define his worth instead of fear. It looks like letting his story rest in hands wiser than his own. The listener is invited into that same interior space, to imagine lying in stillness, with the awareness that divine love has drawn close, to sense that obedience is not first about doing, but about allowing the heart to soften toward God, to let the body mirror this softening. The shoulders can drift a little heavier into the bed or chair. The muscles along the spine can loosen, as if unhooking themselves from invisible expectations. The hands can relax, fingers uncurling, resting open upon the blanket. as if ready to receive rather than to grasp. In this gentle posture, the soul becomes like soil after rain, cool, receptive, ready for seeds and roots and new beginnings. Jeremiah's thoughts drift again to his people. He thinks of market streets crowded with voices, trades, arguments, laughter. He remembers overhearing conversations where trusting God sounded thin, worn at the edges by worry and compromise. He thinks of leaders who speak words of comfort that do not match their actions, of neighbors who chase security in things that cannot hold them, of families who carry heavy burdens without turning toward the one who could carry them together. His heart aches. It is a familiar ache, one he has carried quietly for years. But tonight, it feels different. Tonight, that ache is no longer just a personal sorrow. It has become part of his calling, part of the way God's compassion will move through him toward others. He realizes slowly that obedience will mean allowing this ache to grow into action one day, allowing his concern to become words, his sorrow to become prayer, his sensitivity to become a vessel for divine truth. He does not yet know how he will stand, or what he will say. He only knows that love has asked something of him, and that love has promised never to leave him alone in the asking. The roots of obedience push a little deeper. He remembers the gentle correction of the voice he heard. Do not say you are only small. The phrase lingers. For so long he has measured himself by comparison, measured his voice against the strong voices of others, measured his stature against the tasks that lie ahead, measured his confidence against the expectations of his community. Tonight, God has invited him to accept a new measure, not of size, but of nearness, not of skill, but of surrender. Obedience is beginning to look less like achieving and more like leaning the weight of his life into the arms of the one who called him, leaning his plans into a story larger than he can see, leaning his fears into a heart that understands them better than he does. The listener can feel this shift as well. A gentle movement from self-striving toward restful trust, from tight effort toward quiet surrender. The body can echo this movement. Let the breath become a little slower. In through the nose, perhaps, if that feels easeful. Out through the mouth or nose, whichever feels kinder to the lungs. Each exhale can carry with it a small release of pressure. The pressure to be enough, to know enough, to do enough. Jeremiah opens his eyes once more, adjusting slightly to the low light of the lamp. Its flame flickers, then steadies, casting shifting patterns across the worn walls. He watches the movement of light and shadow, noticing how they dance together, neither one fully disappearing. Perhaps obedience is something like that. Not the disappearance of fear, but its movement within a greater light. Not the erasing of uncertainty, but its surrender to a presence strong enough to hold both doubt and faith together. He does not speak aloud to God in this moment. Words feel small beside what his heart is experiencing. Yet his silence is not empty. It is full of consent. Full of a quiet yes that God hears more clearly than any sentence spoken with trembling lips. Outside, the night deepens. Inside, the roots of obedience deepen with it. They do not rush. They are not forced. They grow in the rich soil of being known and loved. This is how many callings truly begin. Not with grand declarations, but with a simple heart, lying awake in the quiet, whispering through its very being, "If you stay near, I will follow as I am able. If you remain, I will walk even while I tremble." The sacred weight on Jeremiah's chest feels a little more natural now. Less like something foreign. More like something that belongs. Something that has always been his. Simply waiting for the right moment to be revealed. His eyelids grow heavier. His breathing steadier. Sleep draws near like a soft blanket, ready to cover him in rest. The God who called him does not demand that he rise tonight to carry out the fullness of his mission. Instead, that God invites him to sleep under the promise of presence. To let obedience grow even in rest. To trust that the one who planted this calling will also tend it. Nourish it. Bring it forth in the proper time. As the young prophet finally allows his eyes to close fully, the room slips into deeper stillness. The lamp burns low. The stars keep their silent watch. And unseen beneath the surface of one surrendered life, the roots of obedience continue to grow. Slow, quiet, strong. There are certain moments in life when the world feels suspended, as if everything has quieted just enough for the soul to hear a voice it had been missing for years. A voice not loud, not forceful, but steady, patient, familiar in a way the heart recognizes before the mind can understand. Jeremiah wakes into such a moment, just before dawn, when night has not yet released its hold and morning has not yet claimed the sky. The air around him feels different, thicker somehow, softer somehow, as if the stillness itself has drawn closer, listening with him, breathing with him. The lamp beside his mat has finally gone out, leaving the room lit only by the fragile silver glow creeping in through the window. Shadows stretch gently across the floor, long, calm, unmoving. The world outside is caught between breaths. No birdsong yet. No voices rising from nearby homes. Only the soft hum of creation resting before its daily awakening. Jeremiah remains still, lying on his back, hands loosely folded upon his chest. His eyes blink open slowly, adjusting to the dim light. The memories of the night before return not as sharp images, but as warmth, as presence, as a lingering sense of divine nearness that has not left him. The touch on his lips continues to glow like an ember deep inside, not fading, not cooling, but holding steady, a quiet flame that declares without words that something sacred has been entrusted to him. As his waking deepens, he becomes aware of another sensation rising within him. Not fear, not confusion, something gentler, something like guidance, something like the whisper of a voice moving through the stillness of his spirit. It speaks not in sentences, but in impressions, in the way a soft breeze carries meaning without sound, in the way dawn reveals the world slowly, one line at a time. He senses the invitation before he understands it, to rise, to listen, to pay attention to what God is forming in him in this quiet hour. So he moves slowly, carefully. His body adjusts from rest, joints. Whispering softly as he pushes himself upright, he wraps a simple cloth around his shoulders, protecting himself from the coolness of the early morning air. His bare feet press lightly against the woven mat, then against the cool earth floor, grounding him, steadying him. He steps toward the small window, where faint light brushes against the frame. Outside, the world rests beneath a pale blue shadow. Fields lie untouched, covered in dew that glistens faintly. Trees stand still, as though waiting for the first breath of wind to guide their leaves. Distant hills stretch gently into the horizon, softened by the haze of the coming day. In this tender landscape, Jeremiah feels God's voice again, not condemning, not commanding, but guiding, with the gentleness of a shepherd leading a timid lamb. You will go where I send you. You will speak what I place within you. You will not walk alone. The impressions move through him like currents of light, gathering softly around his heart. He inhales, letting them settle, letting them deepen, letting them shape the rhythm of his thoughts. And with each breath, the fear that once stood tall within him begins to shrink, not because he has conquered it, but because God stands nearer than fear now. The listener is invited to feel this nearness, to imagine the quiet of early morning wrapping gently around the mind, to sense that God speaks even in moments that feel empty or uncertain, not always with explanation, but with presence, with companionship, with the soft assurance that one does not need to see the entire path in order to take the next step. Let the breath come slow and peaceful, in drawing in trust, out, releasing the weight of needing clarity. Let the shoulders sink a little lower, let the muscles along the face soften, let the heart rest in the truth that God guides gently, never rushing, always meeting the pace of a trembling soul. Jeremiah watches the horizon, slowly, subtly. The first hints of morning gather along its edge. Soft streaks of pale gold begin to appear, blending with the fading blues of night. The sky does not rush, it unfolds, quietly, faithfully, in the order it has always known. Perhaps obedience works the same way, not in leaps, not in sudden certainty, but in gradual unfolding, guided by a soft voice that meets the soul at the pace it can bear. Jeremiah places a hand gently over his chest, feeling the slow rise and fall of his breath. He has not yet spoken a single prophetic word to anyone. He has not yet stepped into the fullness of his mission, but he senses that obedience has already begun. It has begun in listening, in yielding, in letting God's voice shape the quiet places within him. He whispers nothing aloud, and yet his heart offers a response, a willingness, a small, trembling, but unmistakable yes. Outside, the first bird begins to sing, a single note, soft, pure, carried gently through the cool morning air. It is enough to stir the silence, enough to signal the beginning of a new day. Jeremiah lets the sound wash over him, feeling its simplicity, its honesty. The bird does not worry about who hears it. It simply sings because morning has arrived, because light has touched the world again, because something within it responds to the rhythm of creation. Jeremiah realizes he is being invited into a similar rhythm, to respond to the touch he has received, to follow the voice that calls him gently into purpose, to trust the one who has promised to place the right words within him. When the time comes, he breathes again, deeply, slowly. The light outside grows a little brighter, shadows shift, the world awakens, and within one young prophet, obedience begins to take its quiet, steady shape. He does not step out the door yet, not because he is resisting, but because God is not rushing him. This moment is for listening, for absorbing, for letting truth sink all the way into the roots of who he is becoming. The presence around him feels like soft arms wrapping gently around his uncertainty, as though God is saying, "Let this hour be enough. Let this nearness be the beginning." Let trust grow at the pace of sunrise. Jeremiah rests his hand along the wooden frame of the window. He lets the dawn lift slowly before him, and with a quiet exhale, he leans a little deeper into the voice he now knows will guide every step he takes. Courage does not always arrive with a shout. Sometimes it comes as a quiet warmth in the chest, a slow steadiness in the breath, a gentle conviction that grows in the spaces where fear once lived alone. Jeremiah stands at the doorway of his home as morning unfolds. Light has now spread across the fields, soft and pale, laying itself over the earth like a calm blessing. The sounds of waking life begin to gather. Someone draws water from a nearby well, the rope creaking softly, the bucket touching stone with a muted echo. Hoofbeats tap lightly along the road as a small cart moves toward distant fields. Voices rise and fall in gentle conversation. The simple music of an ordinary day beginning again. Yet within Jeremiah there is a difference that cannot be seen by others. The same world surrounds him, yet he no longer stands in it as one who feels invisible. The words of God linger inside him like a song that does not fade when other sounds begin. Before you were formed, you were known. I have placed my words within you. I am with you. The memory of those truths rests upon his heart like sunlight resting on still water. They do not erase his questions, but they change the way those questions feel. They no longer rise from a place of being forgotten. They rise within the safe knowledge that he is seen, understood, and lovingly held. He steps out into the open air. The earth feels firm beneath his feet, cool and textured, grounding each step. A small wind moves across the land, brushing his face, stirring the edges of his clothing, as if reminding him that life itself is in motion. He draws in a slow breath and lets it out again. Something within him softly agrees to the day, to whatever small obediences it will hold. For so long he believed courage belonged only to those who felt strong, to those whose voices did not tremble, whose hearts did not ache so easily. But now he begins to sense another kind of courage. The courage born from being fully known and not rejected. The courage that grows when every weakness has already been seen by God and yet love has stayed. The listener is invited to feel this as well. To imagine standing at the threshold of a new day or a new season, carrying uncertainties and tenderness that feel too exposed. To hear again the whisper that met Jeremiah in the quiet. You are known, completely, and still chosen. Let the body respond to that truth with gentle release. Let the shoulders drift down. Let the jaw soften. Let the breath come a little deeper, as if inhaling safety and exhaling the need to hide. Jeremiah moves through simple tasks, fingers steady as they tie knots, lift vessels, arrange tools. His actions look ordinary to anyone watching, but within him a sacred awareness has awakened. He is no longer moving as one who imagines his life unnoticed by heaven. He moves as one who understands that every step, every word, Every quiet act of faithfulness is seen by the one who called him. He remembers the fear that rose when he first heard the word nations. How distant and large it sounded. How impossible it felt that a young and quiet heart could ever carry such a weight. That fear is still present, like a shadow stretched along the ground. But now there is light beside it. The light of being known completely, before any task was given. If God knew every hesitation and still chose him, then perhaps weakness is not a barrier after all. Perhaps it is the very place where divine strength will be most visible. Perhaps courage is not the absence of trembling, but the willingness to take a step while held by a faithful hand. For the listener, this becomes a mirror. Many hearts carry dreams and nudges of calling that feel too large. Many souls whisper within themselves that they are not enough, not ready, not worthy. But the God who met Jeremiah meets each of these hearts with the same gentle truth. Nothing about you is hidden from me, and I am still here. Let that assurance move like quiet light into the inner places where self-doubt has lived for so long. Let it rest on old memories, on moments of failure, on seasons when courage seemed impossible. God is not surprised by any of these things. And still, he calls. Jeremiah pauses beneath the shade of a tree. Branches stretch overhead, leaves shifting softly as the morning breeze passes through them. Light filters down in scattered patterns, drifting across his hands, his arms, the ground at his feet. He watches the way shadow and brightness interweave. It reminds him of his own heart. Parts of him feel brave, parts still afraid. Yet both now live beneath the same gentle sun. Both are held beneath the same gaze of God. He realizes that he does not need to wait until every trace of fear disappears before he can begin to obey. God has already taken account of his trembling, and has promised to be with him in each moment it returns. This knowing does something deep within him. It straightens the posture of his inner life, not with pride, but with quiet dignity. He is known. He is loved. He is accompanied. From that place, courage begins to rise like a small flame protected by cupped hands. The listener is invited to imagine that same flame within their own chest. Not a raging fire, just a steady glow, fed by every moment God has seen them clearly and refused to turn away, fanned by each memory of comfort in lonely hours, strengthened by every gentle reassurance that arrived when it was most needed. Take a slow breath in, as if drawing that warmth closer. Let the exhale fall out gently, as if releasing the layers of defense no longer needed before a God who already knows everything. Jeremiah understands that courage will not always feel like this soft morning. There will be days when his knees shake, when his words are resisted, when tears fall heavy for a people who do not want to listen. But even in those days, this foundation will remain. He will never face resistance as a stranger to God. He will always stand as one fully known and fully held. For now, it is enough to let this realization settle into his bones. Enough to let the steady knowledge of divine intimacy become the quiet source of his strength. Enough to walk through this ordinary morning with the extraordinary assurance that his life is woven into a purpose far beyond what he can see. He takes another step, then another, each one small, each one carried inside the larger movement of God. Courage is awakening within him, like light slowly filling a valley at dawn. There is a delicate space between fear and faith, a space the soul often visits in quiet hours when calling begins to take shape. It is not a place of certainty, nor a place of despair. It is the in-between, the tender threshold where trembling hearts learn to lean on a presence far stronger than themselves. Jeremiah walks into that space now, not with bold steps, but with the careful, measured movements of someone holding both hesitation and hope in the same fragile breath. The morning has grown brighter, sunlight warms the edges of rooftops, dust glimmers in the air as the world stirs into full life. Children laugh somewhere behind a stone wall, their voices rising like tiny bells. Merchants set out their goods, fabrics unfolding in soft colors, jars clinking gently as they are arranged. The ordinary rhythm of life continues, unaware of the weight resting on one young prophet's shoulders. Jeremiah moves through these familiar scenes with quiet awareness. His steps seem slower, each one grounded, deliberate. He notices small things he often overlooks: the way sunlight pours over the top of a fig tree, the pattern of shadows cast by an old stone fence, the soft murmuring of two elders sharing the morning's first conversation. The world feels somehow more alive, more sacred, as though every detail whispers a reminder that the God who formed creation also formed him, and walks beside him still. Yet even with this awareness, a gentle tension moves within his chest. He does not yet know how to begin. He does not know how his voice will carry truth to those who have grown weary of hearing it. He does not know how to hold the weight of a message that will challenge, confront, and invite change. A part of him still wishes he could remain unseen, untouched by great responsibility. But another part, a deeper part, has begun to awaken with courage. Courage not fueled by self-confidence, but by the quiet certainty that God is near. He pauses near a small well at the edge of town, the stone rim cool beneath his fingertips, the rope hanging loosely, waiting to be drawn. He leans forward and looks into the still water below. His reflection appears faintly, wavering with each tiny movement of the surface. A young face, earnest eyes, features softened by worry and wonder. He studies himself for a long moment. This is the one God chose, not a warrior, not a priest from a renowned household, not a leader known for eloquence, just a quiet young man with a tender heart and trembling hands. The reflection flickers slightly. As a breeze drifts over the well, Jeremiah lifts his gaze. Somewhere deep within, he begins to understand that God never intended him to become someone else. The call was not given to a future version of himself. It was given to who he is now, shaped by every moment of weakness, every tear shed in compassion, every ache felt for a broken world. The listener is invited into this realization, to sense that the gap between fear and faith is not a place to be ashamed of. It is a sacred ground where God often does his most tender work. Let the breath reflect this truth. Inhale slowly, letting the chest lift with gentle acceptance. Exhale softly, releasing the weight of trying to be someone stronger than you are. This breath, this moment, this tenderness is enough. Jeremiah steps back from the well and begins to walk again. With each step, the inner tension shifts, not disappearing, but settling into a quieter rhythm. Fear hums like a low note inside him, but faith begins to rise beside it. Two notes merging into a steady harmony, a harmony that guides him into obedience one small step at a time. He remembers how God spoke to him, not with impatience, not with blame, but with knowing, as though God had already walked through Jeremiah's entire life, seeing every moment he would falter, every moment he would rise, and still chose to stay, still chose to call, still chose to place his words within him. This memory warms him from within. It softens the pressure he felt earlier, the pressure to become a flawless messenger. He begins to understand that God does not ask him to be fearless. He asks him to walk with him, step by trembling step, lean by trust-filled lean. Jeremiah slows as he reaches the edge of a field. Dew still clings to blades of grass, shimmering like tiny pearls. The wind moves across the open space, carrying with it sense of earth, of growing things, of quiet possibility. He lowers himself to the ground, knees bending until he sits among the soft grasses. He places his hands on the soil, fingers sinking into the cool earth. The ground feels steady beneath him, anchoring, unshakable. He breathes deeply, letting the rootedness of the earth remind him that he too can take root, even in his fear, even in his uncertainty, even in the vastness of a calling he barely understands. For a long while, he simply sits there, letting the silence speak, letting creation itself remind him of truths older than his doubt. Seeds sprout without seeing the sky at first. Trees grow strong not by striving, but by receiving sun and water and time. Rivers carve paths through stone not with force, but with steady persistence. Jeremiah feels these rhythms echoing gently within his spirit. Courage grows this way too, not in sudden leaps, but in slow unfolding, not through perfection, but through presence. He closes his eyes, allowing the wind to move through his hair, carrying with it a scent that feels almost like freedom. A whisper stirs inside him once more, not new, but clearer. You do not walk alone. I am here. I will guide you. I will strengthen you. I will give you every word you need, in the moment you need it. This truth settles into him like warm oil poured over a weary heart. He breathes it in. He lets it soften the corners of his fear. He lets it deepen the foundation of his growing courage. When he opens his eyes again, the field looks brighter, the world feels less overwhelming, and the space between fear and faith feels just a little narrower. Not because the path has changed, but because the one who walks with him has become more real to him, more near, more intimately present. Jeremiah rises slowly. The morning continues. The people continue. The world continues. And he begins to continue with it, carrying a small but steady flame of courage inside him. A flame that will grow. A flame that will guide him. A flame that was lit not by his own strength, but by the gentle breath of God. There are some journeys that a soul could never imagine walking alone. Paths that wind through uncertainty and cost, through surrender and deep honesty. Jeremiah has stepped onto such a path. And yet, from the very beginning, it has been marked not by solitary struggle, but by steady companionship. As the day stretches forward, the memory of fields and dew and quiet courage lingers around him. He moves among familiar tasks, hands working, mind gently listening, heart quietly attuned to the nearness that has begun to feel like a constant presence. He senses God not as a distant ruler watching from far away, but as a gentle nearness beside him, within him, around him, a presence as close as breath, as steady as the ground beneath his feet. The people around him see only an ordinary young man. They notice small movements, the way he pauses more often, the way his gaze softens when he listens. But they do not see what his soul has begun to know. that every step is now accompanied, that every thought is overheard with tenderness, that every fear is held in hands that do not let go. He walks along a narrow path at the edge of the town, where wild grasses sway at knee height, brushing softly against his legs as he passes. The sun is higher now, casting warm light across fields and rooftops, drawing thin shadows behind stones and low walls. A bird glides overhead, wings spread wide, riding the unseen currents of air, barely needing to move, simply carried. Jeremiah watches it for a moment. There is a quiet recognition in his heart. This is what companionship with God feels like now. Not the removal of effort, but the gentle lift of a presence that bears the greater weight. The listener is invited to feel this image resting within the mind, to imagine being carried by a strength that does not grow tired, to know that beneath every step, another support holds steady, unseen but sure. Let the breath reflect this truth. A slow inhale, as if being lifted on a gentle current. A soft exhale, as if resting in arms that will not release their hold. Jeremiah continues along the path until he reaches a quieter place, perhaps a cluster of olive trees, their trunks twisted and wise, roots dug deep into the earth, branches spreading in patient arcs. He steps beneath their shade. The air cooler here, filled with the faint scent of leaves and earth and thyme. Sunlight slips through the spaces between branches, laying soft patterns of light and shadow across his skin. He leans his back lightly against one of the trees, feeling its solidity, its age, its calm. In this sheltered place, the awareness of divine companionship deepens. He remembers again the words placed within him. I am with you. They are no longer simply sounds recalled from the night. They have become a living reality, a quiet strength that threads itself through every moment. He thinks of the road that lies ahead, even if he cannot see its shape clearly. He senses that there will be days when he will stand before people who do not want to hear. Days when truth will be heavy on his tongue. Days when loneliness will press close, like a cold wind against unprotected skin. If he imagined those days without God, they would feel unbearable. But paired with companionship, they become different. Not easy, but held. Companionship does not erase struggle. It transforms the way struggle is carried. The heavy becomes shared. The unknown becomes walked together. The path becomes less about proving strength, and more about staying close to the one who leads. The listener may feel echoes of their own path in this. Nights when the future feels unclear. Days when tasks seem beyond capacity. Seasons when the heart feels too fragile for the weight it holds. Into each of these places, divine companionship offers itself quietly, not as a loud interruption, but as a steady presence whispering, "You are not alone in this." Allow that whisper to rest gently over the body, Let the shoulders soften, as though an unseen hand has come to share the weight they have carried. Let the muscles around the heart feel less guarded, less braced. Let each breath come as a reminder that every inhale and exhale happens before a God who stays near. Jeremiah closes his eyes beneath the olive branches. He does not speak aloud. Yet his thoughts move toward God easily now, as naturally as breath. He thinks of his fears. He thinks of his inadequacy. He thinks of the enormity of being called to speak truth in difficult times. But for the first time, each of these thoughts appears beside another awareness. God is here. In this fear, God is here. In this inadequacy, God is here. In the enormity of this task, companionship does not stand at a distance, waiting for him to become brave. It sits beside him in his trembling. It remains when his courage flickers low. It holds steady when his understanding fails. A small breeze moves through the grove. Leaves rustle with a soft, layered sound, like many quiet voices sharing the same peaceful note. The light shifts, patterns of brightness and shade gliding gently across his face. His hands, the ground. Jeremiah feels the movement and thinks of another truth. God is not static. This companionship is alive, responsive, attentive, meeting him in each new moment, adjusting with his steps, offering strength exactly where it is needed. He realizes that even silence can be filled with presence. Even when no words are spoken, God listens. Even when no vision appears, God watches. Even when he does not feel strong emotion, God remains. For the listener, this becomes an invitation to trust that quiet does not mean absence, that stillness does not mean abandonment, that in long stretches where nothing seems to change, companionship is still there, like roots deep in the ground that hold a tree steady during windless days. Take another slow breath. Imagine those roots of divine companionship reaching beneath your life, supporting you in ways you cannot see, holding you upright when you feel you might fall, steadying you when the future feels heavy and unclear. Jeremiah opens his eyes again. The day continues, unhurried. He rises from beneath the olive tree with a new awareness resting in his bones. He is not merely someone who has heard a command. He is someone who will walk every step of that command with God at his side. Whatever the future holds, this companionship will remain the quiet center of his strength. When he speaks, he will not speak alone. When he weeps, he will not weep unseen. When he feels too weak to continue, the one who called him will carry him in ways he cannot yet imagine. This is the quiet strength of divine companionship. Not loud, not dramatic, but constant, like the steady pulse beneath the skin. Like the soft rhythm of breath that continues even in sleep. As Jeremiah turns back toward his town, his steps feel different. Not lighter because the path is easy, but steadier because he knows he will never be asked to walk it without help. The same is offered to every listening heart tonight. A God who does not merely direct from afar, but walks within each moment, each choice, each sigh. A God whose nearness becomes the deepest source of courage and rest. There are seasons in a calling when the path begins to open, not all at once, not in great leaps of clarity, but in gentle steps, small unveilings, quiet movements of grace that begin to shape the way forward. Jeremiah stands at the edge of such a season now, where obedience begins to meet direction, where companionship begins to reveal purpose, where the quiet whisper of God subtly becomes the guidance of a shepherd leading a willing heart. As the morning deepens, he walks slowly along the narrow paths that weave through the outskirts of his town. Each step feels different now, not lighter in the sense of ease, but more rooted, more intentional, as if the ground itself recognizes something has awakened within him. People pass by, some carrying water jars, others leading animals, some engaged in slow conversation as they begin their day. They see him and nod, greeting him with the same familiarity they always have. To them, he is still Jeremiah, still the quiet young man with gentle eyes and a thoughtful spirit. They cannot see the shift occurring beneath the surface of his life. They cannot hear the voice that now walks beside his thoughts. But Jeremiah knows. The world has not changed, yet his place in it has. He pauses near a field where workers have begun their labor for the day. Voices float toward him on the breeze, laughter mingled with effort. Tools strike earth in slow rhythm. Dust lifts softly, catching sunlight in brief, shimmering bursts. He watches for a moment, noticing how each person commits to their task, each movement purposeful, even if small. The field does not flourish through one grand effort. It flourishes through steady, faithful labor. Each seed placed with intention, each furrow shaped by patient hands, each drop of water carried with care. Jeremiah begins to understand something in this simple scene. God's calling unfolds in the same way, not through overwhelming instruction, but through gentle steps, through small obediences that bloom into larger ones, through trust that grows in increments, root by root, breath by breath. The listener is invited to feel the truth of this, to realize that purpose does not always arrive with clarity or certainty. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in small decisions to stay soft, to stay near to God, to take just the next faithful step. Let the breath follow this rhythm, a slow inhale, receiving the peace of gentle guidance, a long exhale, releasing the pressure to see the whole path at once. Calling grows at the pace of trust, and trust grows at the pace of breath. Jeremiah continues walking, but his steps turn instinctively toward a quieter part of the land, a place where hills rise gently, where a small grove of trees creates a natural shelter from the midday sun. He enters the shade and sits on a smooth stone worn flat by years of weather and time. The wind here is softer, cooler, carrying with it the faint rustle of branches and the earthy scent of the soil beneath them. He lets his hands rest on his thighs, palms open, as though ready to receive whatever God desires to place within him next. In this stillness, the presence of God wraps around him again, not in sudden clarity, but in subtle guidance. He feels more than he hears the next movement of God's voice, a quiet nudge, a peaceful direction, a sense that obedience will soon require stepping beyond private moments and into the lives of others. But for now, the guidance is gentle, like a hand resting on the shoulder, like the slow turning of a heart toward a deeper purpose. Obedience will not be asked all at once. It will unfold through hidden pathways, through choices made in love, through courage expressed in small, almost unnoticeable ways. He closes his eyes, letting the sound of leaves whisper truth across his spirit. The one who calls you will show you each next step. You do not need to fear the unknown when the guide remains known. You do not need to see the entire journey when the one who shaped you also shapes the path. Jeremiah breathes these impressions deeply. They settle into him. With a peace that feels older than the land he sits upon, he realizes that God does not merely call him to speak. God calls him to walk, to move, to trust, to carry his presence into places where people have forgotten how loved they are. This truth begins to anchor him in ways he didn't expect. Purpose is not just a task, it is a companionship lived out in daily steps. The listener can feel this anchor forming quietly within their own heart, a sense that purpose is not a pressure, not a test, not a performance. It is a journey shaped by a God who walks every moment with them. Let this realization soften the body. Let the spine rest back, supported, safe. Let the breath deepen into a calmer rhythm. Let the mind loosen its grip on fear. Jeremiah opens his eyes again. The breeze moves gently through the trees. Sunlight filters through in soft golden flecks. The world around him seems to pulse with a quiet invitation. He is beginning to see that calling is not merely about words spoken in strength. It is also about listening, observing, understanding the heart of God before carrying the heart of God to others. He rises slowly, feeling grounded, steady. The path ahead will not be without difficulty. He senses that deeply. But he also senses that every difficult moment will reveal a new layer of divine companionship. Every act of obedience will open another hidden pathway. Every step forward, no matter how small, will be attended by the one who knew him before time began. A soft peace settles over him. It is not the peace of answers, but the peace of direction. The peace of knowing that God is guiding him gently, faithfully, one step at a time. As he steps out from beneath the trees, sunlight warms his face. The day continues, and Jeremiah continues with it, led by a voice that does not rush, held by a presence that never grows distant, guided by a love that shapes each moment with wisdom and care. This is how obedience opens hidden pathways, not through certainty, but through surrender, not through strength, but through trust. Not through knowing everything, but through being known completely. There are days when the world feels heavier than one pair of shoulders can bear, when the air itself seems thick with worry and weariness, when the patterns of people's lives circle around the same fears, the same compromises, the same quiet forgetting of the one who loves them. Jeremiah walks through such a world. The streets he knows so well carry more than the sound of footsteps and trade. They carry unspoken burdens, hidden disappointments, guarded hearts. He sees it now more clearly than before, as though the touch upon his lips has also opened his eyes, gently, gradually, to the weight that rests upon his people. He passes by a small group gathered near a doorway, their voices low, concerned, speaking of crops that might fail, of debts that feel too large, of leaders whose words offer comfort that does not reach their fear. Further along, he notices a man sitting alone, shoulders curved inward, eyes distant, as if staring into a worry too deep for words. Nearby, children play, but even their laughter carries a fragile edge. Their world is shaped by choices made long before they were born, by patterns of trust and distrust, of faithfulness and forgetfulness, that they did not choose, yet now live within. The heaviness of it all stirs something inside Jeremiah. It is not new. He has always felt a sorrow he could not explain when he looked at his people. But now that sorrow glows with a different kind of light, he begins to see it as part of the way God shares his own heart with him, a holy burden, not to crush him, but to invite him to carry light into places grown dim. The listener may recognize this feeling, that quiet ache when seeing pain in others, that heaviness when the world seems lost in noise and distraction, that tug within the heart that says there must be more hope available than what is being embraced. These are often the first signs of a calling to be a bearer of light, not a perfect light, not a loud light, but a steady one, Let the body listen to this truth with gentleness. Let the shoulders rest a little heavier into what holds them, as if setting down burdens that were never meant to be carried alone. Let the breath deepen, in through the nose, out in a long soft stream, like a lantern being slowly lit in the chest. With each inhale, imagine drawing in the light of God's nearness. With each exhale, imagine releasing the belief that the world's heaviness must be solved by personal strength alone. Jeremiah turns a corner and passes near the place of worship. He sees people bringing offerings, voices reciting familiar words, movements practiced over many years. Some come with sincere hearts, others with hearts distracted, divided. For some, devotion has become habit, a rhythm no longer connected to trust. For others, appearances matter more than surrender. Jeremiah feels the tension of it all, the beauty of rituals meant to connect hearts with God, and the sorrow of rituals emptied of tenderness and honesty. He does not stand in judgment over them. He knows his own fears, his own hesitations, his own weakness. Instead, he feels a longing that these people would remember the one who formed them, that they would know how deeply they are loved, that they would see that obedience is not a burden, but a way back into wholeness, into joy, into rest. In that longing, Jeremiah begins to understand more clearly what it means to be called. He is not meant to be a source of light, only a lantern, only a vessel through which divine light may pass. God remains the flame. He is simply the one asked to carry it, even into places where it might not be welcomed at first. This realization both humbles and comforts him. If he were the source, the weight would be unbearable, but as a carrier, he can rest, even while the world remains heavy. He can trust that the light is strong enough, wise enough, pure enough, that his task is not to create it, but to keep it from being hidden. The listener is invited to rest in this same understanding, to know that being a light in a heavy world does not mean having all the answers, does not mean fixing every broken thing. It means staying close to God and allowing His kindness, His truth, His compassion to shine through ordinary words, ordinary gestures, ordinary acts of faithfulness. Let this thought soften the heart. Let the breath grow slower. Let the mind release the idea that purpose must always look grand or dramatic. Often, it looks like quiet presence, gentle honesty, patient love, a small flame that stays lit even when winds of difficulty blow across it. Jeremiah continues walking, and as he does, he begins to carry this inner awareness like a hidden lamp. When he meets someone's eyes, his gaze holds more tenderness. When he hears fear in another's voice, his heart turns inward. In silent prayer, even if his lips do not yet speak the messages he is one day meant to share, already, in these early steps, his calling is unfolding. The light of God's heart for his people has begun to move through him, not yet in public proclamations, but in inward posture, in quiet availability, in the willingness to feel what God feels for those around him. He realizes that carrying light into a heavy world will cost him something. There will be times when he will feel the weight of others more deeply than he ever has. Times when he will stand almost alone in his convictions. Times when the words he is asked to speak will make him misunderstood, perhaps even rejected. But even then, he will not be without comfort. For the same God who placed his words in Jeremiah has also placed his presence around him, like a cloak, like a shield, like the steady warmth of a hand that refuses to let go. The day stretches on, and the heaviness of the world remains. Yet now it is met by something else, a single life, quietly surrendered, beginning to glow from within, not for its own sake, but as a response to the love that formed it, called it, and walks beside it. This is what it means for Jeremiah to carry light into a heavy world, to walk through ordinary places with an extraordinary awareness of God's heart, to let that awareness shape his seeing, his feeling, his eventual speaking, to trust that even in a world weighted with grief and forgetting, The gentle radiance of divine presence still moves, still calls, still heals, through lives yielded to it. Truth is a delicate thing, a living thing, a gift that can heal when received, yet can wound when resisted, and for those called to carry it, the burden is both holy and heavy, like a flame that warms the hands but can also scorch the heart that holds it too tightly. Jeremiah begins to feel the shape of this burden now, not in the words he must speak, those have not yet fully gathered within him, but in the quiet understanding that his calling will not always lead him onto smooth paths or into eager ears. Some truths will be welcomed, others will be met with fear, or anger, or denial. He senses this not as a threat, but as a reality whispered gently by the God who formed him. The day around him continues its slow unfolding. Voices rise and fall. Children chase one another across open courtyards. Vendors call out their offerings in warm, rhythmic tones. Life continues with the familiar patterns of a people who believe they understand their world. But Jeremiah sees something deeper now. He sees beneath the routine, beneath the noise, beneath the practiced words of devotion. He sees a longing they do not name, a disconnect they do not recognize, a forgetting they do not notice growing year by year. In this awareness, the sacred burden of truth begins to form in him, not as judgment, not as superiority, but as compassion. Compassion so deep it aches behind his ribs. Compassion that feels almost too large for a young heart to carry. He steps aside into the quiet of a shaded alley. The walls on either side hold the coolness of stone, the air carrying faint echoes of distant voices. He slides his hand along the rough surface of one wall, grounding himself, as though reminding his heart that this world is real. These people are real, and the love God feels for them is real enough to shape the entire course of his life. He leans his back gently against the stone. The coolness soaks through his clothing, calming the warmth of his thoughts, and in that stillness, the weight of truth settles more fully into his spirit. He is not being called to deliver easy words. He is not being asked to soothe people into comfortable forgetting. He is being prepared to speak words that come from the very heart of God, words that will stir, unsettle, awaken, words that will invite transformation, words that will shine light into places where shadows have grown thick and familiar. The listener is invited to feel the depth of this calling, to sense the tenderness required to hold truth without harshness, to sense the gentleness required to speak truth in alignment with love. Let the breath reflect this balance. A slow inhale, receiving compassion, a long exhale, releasing the instinct to correct out of frustration or fear. Truth is strongest when carried by love, and love is most powerful when grounded in truth. Jeremiah closes his eyes for a moment. Behind his eyelids, the scenes of his people appear one by one. A mother calming a restless child, a man worrying over debts he cannot repay, a young woman whispering prayers she is not sure will be heard, a merchant who has forgotten the tenderness of his youth, a leader whose heart has hardened beneath layers of power and tradition. Jeremiah's spirit feels all of them, not because he seeks to judge, but because he feels the ache God feels, a holy longing for his people to return to the depth of relationship they were created for. Tears gather gently at the corners of Jeremiah's eyes, not tears of fear, not tears of resentment, but tears of burdened love. It is in this tender moment that he understands something profound. A prophet is not simply a messenger. A prophet is one who feels the heart of God so deeply that the truth becomes compassion in motion. He opens his eyes again. The alley seems quieter, even more still, as though the world is giving him space for this inner awakening. The sun shifts slowly across the sky, sending soft beams of light through the narrow opening above. The dust floating in that beam glows like tiny flecks of gold, suspended, drifting, carried by the faintest currents. Jeremiah watches them. He imagines his future words being carried like that, golden flecks of divine truth drifting into hearts that may or may not be ready to receive them. Some will let the light settle, others will turn away, but his task will not be measured by response. It will be measured by faithfulness, by the alignment of his heart with the one who sends him. The listener can rest in this same realization. Truth does not need force to shine. It needs gentleness, integrity, faithfulness. Truth spoken with tenderness carries divine weight. Truth spoken with harshness carries only human frustration. Let this understanding soften the breath. Let the shoulders settle into deeper calm. Let the heart release the pressure to be perfect in offering truth to others. A gentle heart guided by God can do far more than a forceful one guided by fear. Jeremiah steps out of the alley and returns to the open street. He walks slower now, but with more intention. The sacred burden rests within him like a flame shielded by careful hands. He is not yet speaking the words God will give him, but he is preparing. His heart is being shaped, his compassion deepened, his understanding widened. He knows that truth will cost him something. It will call him into places where people resist, where change feels threatening, where light feels too bright for eyes accustomed to shadows. But he also knows this. The God who placed truth within him will remain with him through every moment of resistance, through every tear, through every hour of loneliness. He walks with slow steps, and though he is just one young man moving quietly through an ordinary street, the heavens see more. They see the beginning of a life that will carry truth not as a weapon, but as a beacon, not as condemnation, but as invitation, not as pressure, but as love shaped into words. This is the sacred burden of truth, a burden that does not crush, because God shares its weight, a burden that does not harden, because it is carried in tenderness, a burden that becomes, over time, a guiding light for others lost in the dimness of forgetfulness. There are moments in a calling when the heart seems to reshape itself from the inside, not through force, not through striving, but through the quiet nearness of God pressing gently against the soul, softening what was once rigid, strengthening what once trembled, bringing a new wholeness into places once marked by uncertainty. Jeremiah walks into such a moment now, the sacred burden of truth still warm within him. Yet something else begins to unfold alongside it. Something quieter, deeper, a shift that does not announce itself loudly, but settles like dusk light over a quiet hillside. As he walks away from the shaded alley and returns to the open streets, he feels the presence of God surrounding him more closely than before. It is not simply beside him, it is within him, threaded through his thoughts, laced gently into his breath, resting at the very center of who he is. He realizes with growing awe that he is no longer only a young man carrying a message. He is becoming a heart shaped by God's nearness, a life molded by divine companionship, a vessel formed not just to speak truth, but to embody it. He pauses near a low stone wall that borders a small garden. The plants inside sway softly, touched by a slow afternoon breeze. Leaves glimmer faintly in the warm light, catching sunbeams like droplets of gold held fluttering in the air. He rests his hand upon the top of the wall, feeling the warmth of stone retained from the sun. It feels grounding, steady, like the presence of God pressing reassurance against his palm. Jeremiah lowers himself to sit on the wall's edge. His feet rest lightly against the packed earth below. He watches a single leaf fall from a nearby branch, drifting downward in slow spirals. Its descent is quiet, unhurried, gentle, and something inside him resonates with it. His calling will not always move in dramatic sweeps. It will unfold like that leaf, slowly, faithfully, moved by unseen currents, guided by the breath of God, landing exactly where it is meant to be. The listener is invited to linger in this image, to imagine the soul settling in God's presence as softly as that leaf settles on warm soil, to feel the quiet revelation taking shape, a revelation not of tasks to accomplish, but of identity being transformed. Let the breath slow, a gentle inhale, as if drawing divine tenderness into the heart, a long exhale, releasing the tension of trying to prove worthiness. The transformation God brings is not earned, it is received. Jeremiah lifts his gaze toward the sky. Clouds drift lazily overhead, pale and soft, shifting shapes that never stay the same. He watches their slow dance, their patient movement, and he realizes, the heart transformed by God moves like this too. It is not instantaneous. It is a gradual becoming, a gentle shaping that happens in layers, in breaths, in surrendered moments. He remembers how fearful he felt before, how unworthy, how unsure, and now, though fear has not vanished completely, something has grown stronger beside it, a quiet confidence, not in himself, but in the one who holds his life with steady hands. He feels God's nearness like warmth beneath his ribs, a presence that does not lecture, does not demand, does not rush him, a presence that sits beside him like a friend, like a comforter, like the source of his identity, gently rewriting every old story he once believed about himself. He can almost sense God whispering into the deepest part of him, "Let my nearness form your strength. Let my presence shape your courage. Let my love define who you are becoming." These impressions settle into him like soft rain soaking dry ground, slowly, deeply, bringing life to places he once thought barren. He begins to see that calling is not only about what he will say, it is about who he is becoming, a heart aligned with the heart of God, a life shaped by compassion and truth, a soul learning to walk in step with divine love. The listener is invited to feel this same shift, to sense that transformation is not a reward, but a gift, a quiet work God performs in the soul simply because he is near. Let the muscles in the face soften. Let the shoulders release deeper into rest. Let the breath draw smoothly, like evening wind moving through tall grass. Jeremiah places a hand lightly over his chest. He feels the slow rhythm of his heartbeat, steady, calm, unforced. He realizes something profound. This rhythm now beats in harmony with the one who called him. God's nearness is no longer a momentary comfort. It has become the foundation of his inner life. The sacred burden he carries is no longer heavy in the same way. It is infused with compassion, tempered by love, sustained by divine presence. It does not tighten his chest. It expands it, making room for God's heart to rest within his own. He stands slowly, letting the warmth of the sun reach his shoulders, letting the breeze touch the edges of his clothing, letting the quiet of this moment move deeper into his spirit. He is beginning to understand that obedience is not simply doing what God commands. Obedience is allowing God to shape who he is. It is becoming the kind of heart that speaks truth with tenderness, the kind of voice that carries compassion even when delivering difficult words, the kind of presence that reflects divine love simply by being near. This is transformation, not sudden, not dramatic, but steady, patient, holy, a work done by the God who stays close, who speaks gently, who teaches through nearness rather than force. Jeremiah takes a slow breath. He feels stronger, not in his own strength, but in God's. He feels clearer, not because he sees the entire path, but because he senses the one who guides it. He feels ready, not for all that lies ahead, but for the next small step. The heart formed by God's nearness is not afraid of small beginnings. It is content to be shaped one moment at a time, one breath at a time, one surrender at a time. As Jeremiah resumes walking, he carries a new stillness within him, a stillness born of love, a stillness that will sustain him when storms come, a stillness that whispers through his soul with every step. You are mine, you are guided, you are becoming who I formed you to be. There comes a time in every calling when the heart must learn to rest, not rest from purpose, but rest within purpose. Rest in the certainty that God is already at work, already preparing paths, already shaping outcomes unseen, long before the called one ever takes their next step. Jeremiah enters this tender season now, a season where the weight of his future begins to feel steadier, not because it is lighter, but because he no longer believes he must carry it alone. The transformation that began within him has softened the sharp edges of fear, and now, another grace begins to rise. A grace that teaches the heart to rest in what God has already prepared. The late afternoon sun glows gently over the land, its warm light stretches long across the stone streets, casting shadows that lengthen like soft ribbons across the ground. Everything feels slower, quieter, as though the world itself is inviting him into stillness. Jeremiah moves away from the busier parts of town. He finds his steps guiding him toward a familiar hillside, a place where he has often walked to think, to breathe, to let the weight of his thoughts soften against the vastness of open sky. He climbs slowly, his feet brushing against dry grass, insects humming in the hidden spaces beneath low shrubs, the air warming his skin with the gentle residue of the day's heat. As he ascends, the sounds of the town fade, until only the whisper of wind and the rhythm of his breath remain. At the top, he stands still for a long moment. The landscape opens before him, hills rolling softly into one another, fields spread like calm tapestries of earth and growth, the horizon stretching wide, holding the quiet glow of a sun drifting toward its descent. He lowers himself to the ground, sitting with his legs drawn loosely toward his chest, arms resting around them. The soil beneath him is warm, breathing up the heat of the day in soft waves that ground him. He tilts his head back slightly, eyes half closed, letting the breeze brush gently across his face. In this open quiet, he feels God near, not as instruction, not as direction, but as rest, a holy nearness that settles into the places where tension once lived. It is here, in this sacred stillness, that Jeremiah begins to understand something profound. Purpose is not something he must build. It is something God has already shaped. Long before he lived a single day, he does not walk into a future he must craft with his own strength. He walks into a future already prepared. Every encounter, every moment, every word he will one day speak, all of them held in the hands of a God who sees the end from the beginning. The listener is invited to breathe in this truth, to let it settle like soft dust on the surface of the heart, to feel the shift from striving to trusting, from worrying to resting, from carrying the weight of tomorrow, to resting in the God who already stands within tomorrow. Let the breath slow, inhale gently, as if receiving peace from the open sky. Exhale long, as if releasing the belief that the future must be controlled by human hands. Let the shoulders soften, let the spine rest, let the mind loosen its grip on anxious imagining. Jeremiah draws his knees closer, resting his chin lightly on them. The world around him seems to glow in muted colors, soft golds, pale ambers, gentle browns warmed by fading sunlight. It feels safe here. It feels sacred. It feels like a place where God sits beside him, silent yet fully present. He thinks of everything that lies ahead, the words he will one day speak, the resistance he may face, the tears he may shed for his people. And yet, in this moment, none of these future burdens rise as threats. They rest instead in the quiet knowledge that he will meet each one with God beside him. The future has shifted from something to fear into something to trust. The quiet breeze moves across the hillside. It carries with it the faint scent of earth cooling, grass settling, life winding itself down toward night. Jeremiah feels that same unwinding begin within him, the slow loosening of inner strain, the gentle unclenching of worry he didn't realize he was holding, the peaceful awareness that he does not have to hurry into his calling. He only needs to rest inside the one who has called him. He lies back slowly onto the ground, arms stretching out sideways, palms open. The sky above him deepens into a vast canvas of soft light, fading color by color into the coming dusk. There is something healing in this posture, something surrendering, something trusting. To lie down beneath the open heavens is to acknowledge smallness without fear, to admit limitation without shame, to rest without needing to explain why. The listener is invited into this same posture of the heart, even without lying down. Physically, the soul can recline, can release, can sink into the comforting truth that rest is not wasted time. Rest is sacred obedience. Rest is where God whispers truths too tender for hurried minds. Rest is where tomorrow's strength is quietly formed, unseen, breath by breath. Jeremiah gazes upward. The first small star appears, barely visible against the shades of twilight. It twinkles with gentle persistence, unrushed, unafraid, unbothered by the vastness around it. And he thinks, perhaps this is what God desires for him. Not loud brilliance, not dramatic spectacle, but steady light. Light that remains, even when the world around him darkens. He inhales, deep and slow. He exhales, longer still. The rhythm of rest settles deeper into him. He feels his heartbeat slowing, mirroring the quiet pulse of creation at the edge of night. He feels his thoughts softening, no longer grasping for answers. He feels the nearness of God expanding within him, filling the spaces where tension once lived. This is sacred rest. Rest in a calling already prepared. Rest in a purpose already known by God. Rest in a future that does not need to be rushed toward or feared. Jeremiah closes his eyes. The hillside holds him. The sky breathes above him. God remains beside him, and he rests, deeply, quietly, without resistance. There is a kind of peace that does not arrive through perfect understanding, a peace that does not depend on answers, or clarity, or certainty. It arrives instead when the soul finally releases its grip, when the heart loosens the last threads of self-pressure, when the spirit leans fully into the God who carries every tomorrow already in his hands. Jeremiah rests on the warm hillside, the sky above him deepening into soft shades of indigo and quiet blue. Night gathers at the edges of the world, moving inward like a gentle tide. But instead of fear, instead of unease, he feels something different settling over him, a peace that feels almost weightless, a peace that descends slowly, carefully, as though it does not want to startle him. Around him, the world grows quieter still. The faint rustle of dry grass forms a soft, steady rhythm. Crickets begin their evening song, not sharp or jarring, but gentle, like a distant lullaby woven into the land itself. The earth beneath him holds the warmth of the day, like a cushion created by creation, easing the tension from his muscles. His breaths become slower, longer, each inhale gliding in like a calm breeze, each exhale falling out like water slipping down smooth river stones. He can feel his body responding, shoulders drifting lower, stomach softening, arms melting deeper into the ground's embrace. It is in this quietness that Jeremiah realizes something. The peace he feels is not simply the absence of fear. It is the presence of God, a presence that has followed him, guided him, shaped him, and now rests over him like a blanket laid gently across a child at the end of a long day. The listener is invited into this same awareness, to imagine lying under a vast sky, feeling the world slow around you, to sense a presence sitting nearby, not distant, not silent out of indifference, but quiet out of compassion. Let the breath mirror this nearness, a slow inhale, receiving calm, a soft exhale, releasing every tight place within. Peace is not something earned, peace is something given. Jeremiah opens his eyes again, watching as a few early stars shimmer into view. They appear slowly, one by one, like soft embers rising into the dusk. Their gentle glow steadies him, reminds him that light does not disappear when darkness arrives. It simply changes, deepens, softens, and sometimes becomes more visible when the world grows dim. He lets this truth settle within him. He will face moments ahead when circumstances darken, when voices oppose him, when paths grow unclear, but the light placed within him by God will not be extinguished. It will only shine differently, more quietly, more steadily, more faithfully, because it is not his own flame. It is the flame of God's presence resting in him. He releases a long breath, feeling something inside unclench even further, not a dramatic moment, but a subtle deepening, a quiet surrender into peace, as though he is falling gently into the arms of a God who has been waiting patiently for him to rest. He turns slightly onto his side, curling his legs in. Closer, the way a child might instinctively seek comfort in the softness of a safe place. The ground holds him. The sky covers him. The breeze strokes the hair near his forehead. Everything in creation seems to speak the same message. You are safe. You are held. You are not alone. The listener can rest in this too. Let the neck soften against whatever supports it. Let the breath slow into whatever rhythm feels most natural. Let the mind allow itself not to solve anything, not to plan anything, simply to rest. Rest in being known, rest in being loved, rest in being gently accompanied by God. Jeremiah closes his eyes once more, letting the night settle fully around him. He senses how far he has come from the moment fear first rose like a storm inside him. He remembers how small he felt, how unprepared, how overwhelmed by the thought of being chosen for something so large. And now, though he still feels small, though he still does not know every detail of the future, he is no longer overwhelmed. He is enveloped, surrounded, held. It becomes clear to him, even without words, that this peace is not temporary, not a fleeting comfort, but a lasting gift, something he can return to again and again, something God will renew within him when the path ahead becomes heavy. He breathes again, long and slow. His heart beats more quietly now, no longer pounding with the urgency of fear. His thoughts drift like slow clouds, scattered and gentle, without sharp edges or quick movements. He understands something deeper now, that resting in God is not weakness. It is strength wrapped in softness. It is courage wrapped in surrender. It is the kind of peace that allows him to step into tomorrow not with perfect confidence, but with perfect trust. He allows his body to sink even further. The hillside feels like an embrace. The sky feels like a canopy stretched overhead by loving hands, and he feels God closer than ever, near enough to steady each breath, near enough to quiet every worry, near enough to guide him into deep, restoring stillness. This is the peace found in trusting a larger story, a story written long before he was born, a story he does not have to control, a story where God remains the author and companion, every step, every moment, every breath. Jeremiah rests beneath the growing night, wrapped not only in calm, but in certainty. The God who calls him also keeps him. The God who shapes him also shelters him. The God who sends him also stays beside him. There is a moment near the end of a long day, a moment when light softens, when shadows stretch calmly across the land, when the heart grows quiet enough to hear itself again, and in that quiet, something begins to settle, not with urgency, not with explanation, but with peace. Jeremiah rests within such a moment now, the hillside beneath him holding his weight with familiar gentleness, the sky above him shifting from deep blue to soft velvet, stars blooming slowly across the heavens like tiny blossoms, opening in the dark, each one appearing with unhurried grace, each one shining as if it knows exactly why it exists, exactly where it belongs. He breathes slowly, deeply, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of someone who has surrendered the need to understand everything, someone who has allowed God to guide the heart into stillness, someone who no longer fights the quiet, but welcomes it, resting inside it as though sinking into warm, living water. The world around him settles layer by layer. Wind calms into a soft whisper, distant sounds fade into comforting hums. The earth cools beneath him, releasing the last warmth of the day in gentle waves. Jeremiah feels all of it, not as distraction, but as companionship. Creation itself seems to cradle him, as though God has woven the night into a blanket just for this hour. He turns onto his back again, one arm resting loosely across his ribs, the other stretching slightly outward, palm open, as if offering his heart into the quiet. He does not try to think noble thoughts. He does not try to rehearse truths or summon courage. He simply rests, fully, deeply, without resistance, inside him. The sacred weight of calling no longer feels sharp or overwhelming. It feels softened, cooled, rounded, like a stone smoothed by years of river water, still heavy, still real, but bearable now, not because he is stronger, but because God has drawn closer. The listener is invited into this same descent, to feel the edges of the mind softening, to sense the deeper breath rising within the ribs, to let the exhale fall out slowly, like warm air leaving a quiet room. Purpose does not need to be solved tonight. Rest does not need to be earned. The heart can lie down without condition, without pressure, without performance. Jeremiah watches as night deepens around him. Color fades into gentle darkness. The world becomes silhouette, soft curves of hills, quiet shapes of trees. It is in this simplicity that God's nearness becomes even more tender. Not loud, not insistent, but steady, present. Holding him like a warm hand pressing lightly against the back, he feels something shift inside, a subtle settling, as though the last embers of tension finally release and drift upward like smoke into the night sky. His breath becomes a lullaby to himself, slow, rhythmic, safe. He closes his eyes for a moment, not to sleep yet, but to let the darkness behind his eyelids wrap around him like soft fabric. He imagines the presence of God resting near his shoulder, quiet, calm, familiar, like a companion who needs no words to stay close, and in that closeness, a tender truth rises. Purpose, at its heart, is not something he must chase. It is something that will unfold in its own time, in its own season, guided by the same God who formed him, called him, touched him, and now holds him in this stillness. He exhales with a deeper softness, the kind of exhale that empties old fear, old pressure, old expectations. The hillside receives it, as though the earth itself knows how to absorb what no longer belongs in a weary heart. The listener can follow that same release. Let the breath fall out longer. Let the shoulders melt. Let the spine soften. There is nothing God asks of this moment except rest. Nothing more holy now than lying still in his nearness. Jeremiah opens his eyes again. Slowly, a soft breeze passes across his skin. Cool, refreshing, unhurried. It feels like a sigh from God, a whisper that says, "You may rest now. You may trust now. You may be small and still be held." He lets those impressions linger, letting them grow roots deep within, roots that will hold him steady in days when peace is harder to find, roots that will anchor him when the world presses heavy, roots that remind him that rest is part of obedience, part of calling, part of becoming. The stars above him multiply, a quiet constellation forming overhead, tiny lights scattered across the heavens like promises written long before he was born. He watches them, his chest rising and falling more slowly now, as if syncing with the rhythm of creation itself. He thinks, perhaps this is what it means for purpose to settle like evening light, not with urgency, not with noise, but with a softness that wraps gently around the soul, a softness that says, "The God who calls you holds every breath, every moment, every unfolding step." Jeremiah does not rush to stand. He does not hurry to return to town. He remains on the hillside, letting peace soak deeply into him, letting God's nearness be the final word of the day. And in this stillness, something becomes beautifully clear. Before he can speak for God, he must learn to rest in God. Before he can carry the weight of truth, he must let truth carry him. Before he can step into the future, he must allow the present moment to hold him fully, tenderly, completely. This is the quiet descent into stillness, where calling becomes calm, where purpose becomes peace, where the soul breathes under the gentle arm of a faithful God. There is a sweetness that settles over the soul when it has walked through fear, through calling, through revelation, and finally arrives in the soft meadow of gratitude. Not the loud gratitude born from sudden joy, but the quiet kind, the kind that rises slowly, like warm light spreading across a calm river at dawn, the kind that whispers, "I am held, I am guided, I am loved." Jeremiah lies on the hillside as night gathers fully around him. The stars above him now shimmer with clear brilliance, each one gleaming like a tiny heartbeat in the sky. The wind has gentled, the crickets sing in soft, steady waves, and the land has taken on the calm of a world settling into deep rest. He feels that rest beginning to settle inside him as well, a tenderness blooming beneath his ribs, a warmth flowing slowly through his chest, a sense of deep belonging, not to a task, not to a title, but to God himself. He senses the presence of God not as a distant calling now, not as instruction or correction, but as companionship. So near, so warm, so familiar, that it feels like a constant heartbeat beside his own. This nearness draws gratitude from him like a gentle tide, unforced, unhurried, simply rising within him because God has been faithful at every turn. He thinks back to the trembling that once held him captive, to the fear of being too small, to the weight of inadequacy that pressed against his mind like a shadow, and he realizes, those shadows have softened, not because he is suddenly strong, but because God has walked with him through every step, because God has lifted the burden with gentle hands, because divine light has touched every fearful place within him. The listener is invited into this reflection, to think of the places in their own story where fear once spoke louder than truth, where uncertainty seemed overpowering, where the future felt heavy and unclear, and then to let the breath carry a new understanding. Inhale softly, receiving the evidence of God's nearness. Exhale slowly, releasing the echo of old fears. Even now, even tonight, God is nearer still. Jeremiah slowly pushes himself into a more comfortable position. He draws his legs in slightly, lets one arm rest over his middle, his fingers lightly brushing against the fabric of his tunic. This simple touch grounds him, reminds him that he is here, alive, safe, held. He closes his eyes, allowing the memory of God's words to drift gently across his spirit. "Before I formed you, I knew you. I am with you. I have placed my words within you." These phrases echo softly, glowing like warm embers deep inside him. A quiet smile, small and barely formed, touches the corners of his mouth. It is not the smile of someone who feels triumphant. It is the smile of someone who feels seen, someone who feels understood, someone who has discovered that God's love is not fragile, not conditional, not distant, but steady and unbroken. He lets the night air fill his lungs again, cool, refreshing, soothing, then releases it slowly, a long breath that seems to carry away the last remnants of tension he once held. The stars above him shimmer more brightly. They seem almost aware of him, almost protective, as if creation itself recognizes a heart newly anchored in God's care. Gratitude begins to deepen inside Jeremiah. A gratitude not only for being chosen, but for being accompanied, for being shaped with kindness, for being held while trembling, for being strengthened without being rushed. He understands now that calling is not a single moment. It is a long walk with God, a walk guided by divine patience, divine wisdom, divine compassion, and this realization softens him even more. The listener is invited to dwell in that same gratitude, to let the body grow heavier with peaceful surrender, to let the heart rest in the truth that God does not abandon his own, that every life is seen, held, and guided with tender intention. Let the breath slow, let the chest loosen, let the mind quieten in the warm safety of this truth. Jeremiah lifts his gaze slowly, letting his eyes open once more to the night sky. He sees not random stars, but constellations forming patterns older than any human memory, lines of light that have guided travelers for generations, and something in him feels aligned with that guidance. He realizes that the God who shaped these stars is the same God who shaped his calling, the same God who shaped his heart, the same God who shaped the path he will walk in days to come. This awareness fills him with a deeper peace, a peace not rooted in certainty of outcomes, but in certainty of companionship, of divine presence woven into every breath he will take, every word he will speak, every sorrow he will feel. He rests his hand across his heart, his pulse slow, steady, unhurried. He closes his eyes once more, letting gratitude cover him like warm cloth, letting peace settle into him like soft soil settling after rain. He feels the quiet rise of thankfulness, for God's patience with his fear, for God's tenderness in shaping his voice, for God's presence in every moment of confusion and doubt, for the sacred truth that he is not alone, and never will be again. This gratitude becomes its own kind of worship, silent, deep, slow, a surrender of the heart not in words, but in rest. This is the soul held in eternal faithfulness, a heart breathing peacefully beneath the eyes of a God who never sleeps, a life resting inside divine compassion large enough to hold every future moment before it arrives. There is a quiet that only comes at the end of a long unfolding, a quiet that is not empty, but full of everything learned, everything received, everything settled gently into the soul. It does not rush. It does not ask for more. It simply rests like evening mist settling over a silent valley. Soft, calm, complete. Jeremiah lies beneath the vast night sky, the hillside cradling him with the patience of ancient earth, the stars above him gleaming in slow, eternal rhythms, a soft wind brushing along the contours of the land, as if creation itself is breathing with him, slow, steady, unhurried. He feels small beneath the expanse of heaven, but it is a safe smallness, a gentle smallness, the kind that comes from knowing he is held by someone immeasurably larger, someone who sees all, covers all, guides all. For the first time since the calling touched his lips, Jeremiah allows himself to imagine what lies ahead, not with fear, not with pressure, but with calm acceptance, with a peace anchored in divine companionship. He knows that there will be days when his voice trembles, days when his heart aches for a people who will not listen, days when he will sit alone, wondering whether his obedience is enough. But he also knows, deeply, tenderly, undeniably, that he will never walk through those days alone. The God who called him will walk every step beside him. The God who formed him will speak in every silence. The God who touched his lips will steady every trembling word. And in this awareness, Jeremiah finds himself wrapped in an unbreakable peace. The listener is invited into this same peace, into this same truth, into the gentle certainty that God does not call and then disappear. He calls and then stays in the breath, stays in the quiet, stays in the unknown paths that tomorrow may reveal. Let the breath mirror this nearness. Inhale softly, receiving calm that sinks all the way into the chest. Exhale slowly, letting every remaining tightness fall away. Let the muscles loosen, let the spine release. Let the heart drift into the simple truth that you are seen, loved, guided. Jeremiah turns slightly onto his side, curling his legs, settling deeper into the hillside's soft warmth. His eyelids grow heavier, each blink longer than the last. The stars blur gently into one soft constellation of light, a sky of quiet blessing hanging above him. He thinks of the words God spoke into the marrow of his spirit. Before you were formed, I knew you. I am with you. I have placed my words within you. These truths have woven themselves into the rhythm of his breath, into the beating of his heart, into the shape of his future. He no longer feels the need to strive, no longer feels the need to prove himself, no longer feels the weight of expectation pressing against his young shoulders. He is simply held, fully, unconditionally, lovingly. He breathes this in, deeply, slowly, and as he exhales, his entire body softens into the earth beneath him. Tension dissolves, fear evaporates, even the memory of uncertainty fades into gentle distance. The hillside grows still around him. The night air cools his skin. A soft, almost imperceptible hum vibrates through the land, the sound of creation resting in the presence of its maker. Jeremiah feels wrapped in that rest, as though God has drawn him into the quiet heart of the night, where no burden is too heavy, where no fear is too dark, where no calling is too large for a soul held by divine love. The listener may feel their own body responding now, a gentle heaviness settling in the arms, warmth gathering at the chest, a safe drowsiness moving softly along the back of the eyes. This is the peace that comes when the spirit releases its grip and lets God be the one who holds everything. Jeremiah lets his eyes close fully. The world softens to darkness. Breath deepens into slow, restful waves. His mind grows quiet, thoughts drifting like small leaves carried along a gentle stream. He is not thinking of tomorrow anymore, not thinking of calling, not thinking of words he will one day speak. He is simply resting in the presence of the one who knows every moment before it arrives, who loves him in rising and resting, in speaking and silence, in courage and trembling. He curls deeper into the warm earth, a peaceful weight settling over his limbs, a sacred stillness enveloping him as though the night itself is praying over him, blessing him, guarding him, holding him. The stars above shimmer like watchful eyes, gentle, patient, kind. The breeze hums a soft lullaby through the grass. The earth cradles him with ancient tenderness, and Jeremiah sleeps in the quiet certainty of divine love. This is the peaceful closure of a heart held in God's hands, where calling becomes comfort, where purpose becomes rest, where tomorrow is safe because God is already there. As Jeremiah drifts into deep, restful sleep, may every listening heart drift there too, guided, loved, comforted, wrapped in a peace that does not end when the story does, a peace that stays, breath after breath, night after night, held in the everlasting nearness of God. Thank you for resting in this story tonight. May your sleep be deep, your heart be light, and your spirit held in perfect peace.